Case number 1 is that of Aileen Wuornos. Between 1989 and 1990, the humid highways of Florida became a hunting ground. Aileen Wuornos, a woman battered by a life of systemic abuse and hardship, began shooting men dead. Point 1. She didn't hunt in the shadows. She hunted in plain sight, hitchhiking and turning the cab of a pickup truck into a crime scene. The media dubbed her the Damsel of Death, a nickname that trivialized the brutality of what she did to 7 different men. Hi everyone, and welcome back to Murder Eyes. Before we descend into these final moments, I have a question for you. If you had the chance to hear the absolute truth about one unsolved mystery from a killer on death row, who would you ask? Let me know in the comments below. Wuornos killed 7 men in cold blood. Point 2. Her defense was consistent and, to some, compelling. She claimed that every single one of them had tried to assault her, and that she was merely surviving the only way she knew how. But the law saw it differently. They didn't see a survivor. They saw a predator who lured men into a trap and executed them for their cash and cars. Think about that for a second, the terrifying intimacy of those crimes. In the small, enclosed space of a vehicle, the shift from a transactional encounter to a murder scene happens in a heartbeat. After a highly publicized trial that turned her into a celebrity monster, the state of Florida sentenced her to death. Point 3. On October 9, 2002, the time for arguments was over. She declined a special last meal, opting instead for a single cup of coffee. Point 4. It was a stark, no-nonsense choice that mirrored her hard-edged personality. But it was her final statement that truly cemented her legacy of defiance. As she lay strapped to the gurney, waiting for the lethal injection, she didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't cry for the men she killed. Instead, she looked at the witnesses and delivered a bizarre, cryptic prophecy. She said, "I'd just like to say I'm sailing with the Rock, and I'll be back like Independence Day, with Jesus June 6th. Like the movie, Big Mothership and all. I'll be back." It wasn't a confession. It wasn't an apology. It was a delusion of grandeur. Aileen Wuornos died as she lived, completely detached from the reality the rest of us live in, believing that even death was just another temporary cage she would eventually break out of. Case number 2 is that of Peter Kürten. In the twilight of the Weimar Republic, the city of Dusseldorf was paralyzed by a fear so primal it felt like a return to the Dark Ages. Between February and November of 1929, a shadow stalked the streets. This wasn't just a killer. This was a phantom who attacked men, women, and children with a chaotic brutality that defied profiling. He strangled, he stabbed, he used hammers, and most disturbingly, he reportedly drank the blood of his victims. The press christened him the Vampire of Dusseldorf. But the true horror wasn't his methodology, it was his camouflage. Peter Kürten wasn't a frothing madman hiding in the sewers. He was a dapper, well-groomed factory worker who blended perfectly into the crowd. He was the neighbor you nodded to, the man you sat next to on the tram. Think about the psychological toll that takes on a community, knowing the monster is wearing the face of a gentleman. Kürten's reign of terror ended not because of brilliant detective work, but because of his own twisted ego. He confessed to his wife, urging her to turn him in to collect the reward money. It was a final act of manipulation, controlling the narrative even as the handcuffs clicked shut. He confessed to nearly 80 offenses and 9 murders, detailing them with a sickening lack of emotion. On July 2, 1931, Kürten faced the guillotine. He didn't approach his death with fear or solemnity. Instead, he treated it like a celebratory banquet. He requested a lavish last meal, Wiener Schnitzel, fried potatoes, and a bottle of white wine. He ate with gusto, a man who had devoured innocent lives now devouring a final feast. But it is his final question to the executioner that haunts the history of criminology. As he was strapped down, the blade looming above, he didn't ask for mercy. He asked, "Tell me, after my head is chopped off, will I still be able to hear, at least for a moment, the sound of my own blood gushing from the stump of my neck?" Most killers fear the end. Peter Kürten was looking forward to it. He didn't care about the justice being served. He only cared about experiencing one last sensation. He viewed his own execution not as a punishment, but as the final, ultimate thrill. Case number 3 is that of Roger Keith Coleman. There is no camouflage more effective for a predator than the cloak of victimhood. In the early 1990s, Roger Keith Coleman became the face of a movement. He wasn't just an inmate. He was a cause célèbre, a man who convinced the media, the Vatican, and Time magazine that he was an innocent martyr about to be slaughtered by a corrupt legal system. The reality, however, was buried in a coal mining town in Virginia back in 1981. The victim was Wanda McCoy, a young woman found raped, stabbed, and nearly decapitated in her own home. The tragedy was compounded by a sickening proximity. Coleman was her brother-in-law. He had access, he had opportunity, and according to the state, he had the motive. But Coleman was articulate, intelligent, and relentlessly persuasive. For over a decade, he waged a public relations war from death row, arguing that the real killer was still out there. Think about the agony of the McCoy family, watching the man who butchered their daughter be celebrated as a hero on national television, while they were painted as vengeful bystanders. Despite a global outcry to spare him, the evidence held firm in the eyes of the court. On May 20th, 1992, Coleman was strapped into the electric chair. His final performance was flawless. With the eyes of the world upon him, his last words were calm and piercing. "An innocent man is going to be murdered tonight. When my innocence is proven, I hope America will realize the injustice of the death penalty as all other civilized countries have." It was a chilling statement that haunted the justice system for years, until 2006. That was when modern DNA testing finally allowed the evidence to speak without Coleman's spin. The results were conclusive. Coleman was guilty. There was no doubt. He didn't just take Wanda McCoy's life. He spent his final decade trying to steal her truth. He went to his grave looking the world in the eye and lying, proving that for some, the need to control the narrative is stronger than the fear of God. He wasn't a martyr. He was a master manipulator who played the ultimate con game until the very moment the switch was flipped. Case number 4 is that of Nanny Doss. We are conditioned to trust the elderly. We associate grandmothers with warmth, hard candy, and unconditional love. But Nanny Doss, a woman with a dimpled smile and sparkling eyes, turned that stereotype into a weapon of mass destruction. Known in the press as the giggling granny, she didn't knit sweaters. She wove a web of death that ensnared nearly everyone she claimed to love. Point 1. Between the 1920s and 1954, people around Nanny just kept dying. It wasn't a sudden spree. It was a slow, quiet accumulation of bodies. She killed 4 husbands, 2 sisters, her mother, a grandson, and even her mother-in-law. 11 people in total. Her weapon of choice wasn't a gun or a knife. It was the kitchen. She spiked their coffee and their prune cakes with generous doses of rat poison containing arsenic. Point 2. She nursed them while they were sick, playing the role of the grieving widow or the devoted daughter, all while she was the one tightening the noose. Point 3. Think about that for a second. The person bringing you soup to make you feel better is the very reason your organs are shutting down. Her spree finally ended when a doctor, suspicious of the sudden death of her 5th husband, ordered an autopsy. Point 4. The results revealed enough arsenic to kill a horse. When the police brought her in, they expected a tearful denial. Instead, she laughed. She giggled through the interrogation as if she were gossiping about neighbors rather than confessing to wiping out her entire family tree. Nanny Doss wasn't executed. She was sentenced to life in prison in 1955, but died of leukemia 10 years later. Because she never faced the executioner, she didn't have formal last words on the gurney. However, her defining statement, the words that serve as her epitaph, were spoken during that chilling confession. When asked why she killed so many husbands, she simply chuckled and said, "I was just looking for the perfect mate." It is a statement of terrifying narcissism. To Nanny Doss, human beings were just trial runs. If a husband became boring or annoying or abusive, she simply discarded him like a piece of burnt toast and moved on to the next. She didn't kill out of rage. She killed out of convenience, searching for a fairy tale ending on a road paved with corpses. Case number 5 is that of Carl Panzram. If evil has a face, it likely looks like Carl Panzram. While many serial killers hide behind a mask of sanity or claim they were driven by voices, Panzram offered no such excuses. He was a self-proclaimed monster, a man who didn't just break the social contract. He set it on fire and watched it burn. His life was a cross-country rampage of absolute chaos. A massive, intimidating figure, Panzram claimed to have murdered 21 people, committed thousands of acts of sodomy, and burned down millions of dollars in property. He didn't kill for money, and he didn't kill for lust in the traditional sense. He killed because he despised the entire human race. He viewed his existence as a war against everyone else, writing in his autobiography that he was the spirit of hatred and vengeance. He once stated, "I have no conscience, so that does not worry me. I don't believe in man, God, nor devil. I hate the whole damned human race, including myself." Think about that level of commitment to malice. A man whose only motivation was pure, unadulterated spite. When the law finally cornered him, Panzram didn't fight for his life. In fact, he fought to end it. He despised the prison reformers and human rights groups who tried to save him from the death penalty, threatening to murder them if they intervened. He famously told them, "I wish you all had one neck and that I had my hands on it." He wanted out of a world he loathed. On September 5, 1930, at the Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary, Panzram got his wish. As he stood on the gallows, the executioner paused to adjust the straps, ensuring everything was done by the book. But Panzram had no patience for bureaucracy, even in his final seconds. He glared at the hangman and shouted his infamous final words, "Hurry it up, you Hoosier bastard. I could kill 10 men while you're fooling around." He didn't pray. He didn't tremble. He went out exactly as he lived, angry, violent, and rushing toward destruction. Carl Panzram didn't fear hell. He likely believed he was going there to take over management. Case number 6 is that of William Bonin. The California freeway system is an icon of American freedom, the open road, the Pacific breeze, the possibility of going anywhere. But in the late 1970s, William Bonin perverted that symbol into a graveyard. To the unsuspecting hitchhikers he picked up, the van looked like a ride home. In reality, it was a mobile torture chamber. Bonin, a truck driver who earned the moniker the Freeway Killer, patrolled the asphalt arteries of Southern California looking for the vulnerable. He targeted young men and teenage boys who were simply looking for a lift. Once the door slid shut, the trap was set. Bonin didn't just kill. He inflicted prolonged, sadistic agony on his victims before discarding their bodies along the roadside verges and embankments like common litter. Think about the sheer callousness of that, treating a human life with the same regard as a fast food wrapper thrown out the window. He was convicted of raping, torturing, and murdering at least 14 young men, though the true number of lives he extinguished likely far exceeded the official tally. Bonin didn't always work alone, often treating murder as a shared activity with accomplices, but as the architect of the pain, the ultimate price fell on his head. On February 23, 1996, his time finally ran out. True to his indulgent nature, Bonin's last requests were about satisfying his own appetites one final time. He ordered a gluttonous feast, 2 large pepperoni and sausage pizzas, 3 pints of ice cream, and 3 six-packs of Coca-Cola. He wanted to leave this world stuffed, completely oblivious to the void he had created in 14 families. However, his final words attempted to pivot from monster to mentor. Strapped to the gurney, staring at the ceiling of the execution chamber, he offered this bizarre, detached piece of advice. "I would suggest that when a person has a thought of doing anything serious against the law, that before they did that they should go to a quiet place and think about it seriously." It was a sterile statement, spoken as if murder were merely a bad business investment or a clerical error. William Bonin didn't regret the pain he caused. He only regretted the miscalculation that led him to the needle. He died trying to sound wise, but he only proved how hollow he really was. Case number 7 is that of Dennis Nilsen. London is a city of millions, a sprawling metropolis where it is incredibly easy to disappear. Dennis Nilsen, a quiet, unassuming civil servant, exploited that urban anonymity with terrifying efficiency. Known as the Muswell Hill murderer, Nilsen didn't hunt for sport, financial gain, or sexual gratification in the traditional sense. He hunted because he was lonely. Between 1978 and 1983, Nilsen lured at least 12 young men back to his flat in North London. These were often vulnerable souls, homeless men, drifters, or students whom he met in pubs. He offered them a drink, a meal, and a warm place to stay. But once the door was locked, the kindly stranger vanished. Nilsen would strangle or drown his guests, often watching them slip away with a detached, clinical curiosity. But the true horror wasn't the killing itself. It was what happened afterward. Nilsson didn't dispose of the bodies immediately. He kept them. He bathed them, dressed them, and propped them up in armchairs to watch television with him. For days, sometimes weeks, he lived in a domestic fantasy with the corpses, creating a grotesque reality where his companions could never leave him. Think about the depth of that isolation. A man so desperate for connection that he preferred the rotting company of the dead to the unpredictability of the living. His reign of terror didn't end due to a police manhunt, but because of a plumbing problem. In a twist of dark irony, the drains at his apartment complex became clogged with the human remains he had tried to flush away. When a plumber discovered flesh and bone in the pipes, the quiet neighbor was exposed as Britain's most prolific serial killer of the era. Because the United Kingdom had abolished the death penalty, Nilsson wasn't led to the gallows. He spent decades in prison, writing memoirs and recording eerie tapes, before dying in custody in 2018. However, his final recorded words were a rare departure from the narcissism usually found in these cases. He reportedly said, "I've brought nothing but harm to others. I deserve to be here." It was a stark moment of clarity. Unlike others who blamed society or claimed innocence until the end, Nilsson accepted his reality. He killed to cure his loneliness, but he died exactly as he had lived, surrounded by walls, cut off from the world, and utterly alone. Case number 8 is that of Thomas J. Grasso. There is a specific, sinking kind of cowardice reserved for those who prey on the elderly. It is the ultimate violation of the social contract, attacking those who have neither the strength to fight back nor the time left to recover. Thomas J. Grasso was the embodiment of this predation. In the early 1990s, Grasso went on a spree that targeted the most vulnerable members of society. In Oklahoma, he murdered 87-year-old Hilda Foreman in her own home. He didn't just rob her, he strangled her using the lights from her own Christmas tree. It was a festive decoration turned into a weapon of death, a grim symbol of how Grasso inverted the sanctity of the home. He later traveled to New York, where he murdered 81-year-old Leslie Holtz, choking him to death for a meager amount of cash. Think about the indignity of that. Living nearly 9 decades on this earth, surviving wars and hardships, only to be extinguished by a drifter looking for pocket change. Grasso was eventually caught and extradited to Oklahoma to face the death penalty. Unlike many on death row who fight for every extra day of life, Grasso was strangely impatient. He openly stated that prison life was too hard and that he preferred execution. But while he seemed ready to die, he was incredibly particular about how he dined. For his final meal, Grasso ordered a feast fit for a king, or perhaps a glutton. His order included 2 dozen steamed mussels, 2 dozen steamed clams, a double cheeseburger from Burger King, a half-dozen barbecued ribs, 2 strawberry milkshakes, half a pumpkin pie, and a can of SpaghettiOs with meatballs. On March 20th, 1995, as he was strapped to the gurney, the world waited for a final statement of remorse. Perhaps an apology to the families of the elderly people he had terrorized. Instead, Grasso used his final breath to lodge a customer service complaint. His last words were, "I did not get my SpaghettiOs, I got spaghetti. I want the press to know this." It stands as one of the most absurd final statements in criminal history. Here was a man who had stolen the twilight years of his victims, who had wrapped Christmas lights around a grandmother's neck, and yet, in his final moments, he felt he was the victim of a culinary injustice. He died as he lived, completely self-absorbed, unable to see past his own immediate, petty desires. Case number 9 is that of Bobby Joe Long. Trust is the currency of civilization. We trust that a transaction in the newspaper is safe. We trust that a job listing is legitimate. In 1984, Bobby Joe Long bankrupted that trust across the state of Florida. Known as the classified ad rapist, Long didn't stalk his victims from the bushes. He found them in the mundane columns of the daily paper. Long targeted women who were selling furniture, appliances, or simply looking for work. He used the pretext of a sale or an interview to gain entry into their lives, and then, inevitably, into their cars. Once he had them alone, the facade dropped. Over a terrifying 8-month spree, he raped and murdered at least 10 women. 1. He was a sexual sadist who fed on dominance, leaving a trail of bodies that paralyzed the Tampa Bay area with fear. 2. Think about the vulnerability of that era. Before digital footprints and GPS, answering a classified ad meant meeting a stranger with nothing but your intuition to protect you. For 10 women, that intuition was silenced by Long's calculated brutality. His reign of terror was built on the assumption that he was smarter than the police, but he underestimated the resilience of a survivor. One victim, Lisa McVeigh, managed to survive his abduction. 3 Her incredible recall of details eventually led authorities to his door, ending one of the darkest chapters in Florida's history. Long spent decades on death row, watching his appeals run out one by 1.4 on May 23, 2019, the time for legal maneuvering ended. For his final meal, he requested roast beef, bacon, French fries, and soda, a heavy, greasy comfort meal for a man about to face the ultimate discomfort. When the curtain fell and the execution team asked for his final words, the world waited for an explanation. Perhaps a reason for the rage, or a word of sorrow for the families watching through the glass. Instead, Long offered nothing of substance. His final moments were brief and devoid of remorse. He reportedly asked if any of the victims' families were present, but offered no apology to them. Silence, in this context, is an action. By refusing to apologize, Bobby Joe Long made one final attempt to maintain control. He took his secrets and his hatred to the grave, proving that while the state could take his life, they could not force a conscience into a man who never had one. Case number 10 is that of John George Hay. There is a dangerous myth in the criminal underworld, a legal misunderstanding that has cost many killers their lives. It is the concept of corpus delicti. John George Hay, a charming British con man, believed it meant that if there was no body, there could be no conviction. He was so certain of this that he turned a workshop in Crawley, West Sussex, into a house of horrors, earning him the nickname, the Acid Bath Murderer. Between 1944 and 1949, Hay didn't just kill his victims. He erased them. 1 Motivated by pure greed, he targeted wealthy acquaintances, shot them, and then dissolved their bodies in 40-gallon drums filled with concentrated sulfuric acid. He believed he was committing the perfect crime, reducing human beings to unrecognizable sludge so he could sell their possessions and live a life of leisure. Think about the cold, industrial nature of that. Watching a human life dissolve into liquid waste just to pawn a fur coat or cash a check. But chemistry is a precise science, and Hay was an amateur. When he murdered wealthy widow Olive Durand Deacon, he assumed she would vanish like the others. But while acid destroys flesh, it struggles with plastic and bone. Police investigators searching his workshop found a gruesome slurry that contained gallstones and, crucially, a set of acrylic dentures. The dentist confirmed they belonged to Mrs. Durand Deacon. They no body, defense crumbled instantly. Hay was sentenced to death. On August 10, 1949, at Wandsworth Prison, he prepared for the hanging with the air of a man inconvenienced rather than terrified. He ate a traditional English breakfast, bacon, eggs, and toast, and requested a final cup of tea. His last words were not spoken to the crowd, but written in a letter to his girlfriend, Barbara. It read, "It is difficult to say farewell under these circumstances, but you will understand that you will always be in my thoughts. You know I have been proud of our association. It has always been an honorable one. I shall remember your great kindness and devotion. Now I must leave you." It is a letter of startling normalcy, almost romantic. It creates a jarring disconnect. A man capable of dissolving 6 people in acid writing about honor and kindness. John George Hay died believing he was a gentleman who simply had a messy business strategy, proving that the most dangerous mask a killer wears is the one he sees in the mirror.